Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to this pranayama practice. Thank you so much for joining in for this practice. I really hope that you are going to find it nice and soothing. Make sure that you take a completely comfortable position here. So ideally, we want to be upright and seated with an erect spine. It could be that you can achieve that just by sitting on your mat. It could be that you will be taking a wall support behind your back. But if for whatever reason being seated is not comfortable at this stage, you are welcome also to lay down on your back. You can be in your semi-supine position with the knees facing up towards the ceiling. You can lay down in Shavasana, placing something underneath the knees and the head. So really just make it nice and comfortable here so you can focus on the quality of your breath and not be disturbed or distracted by any bodily discomforts. Now, before we go into our practice today, I would like to tell you a little bit more about pranayama, what this is and how we are using it in our practice, the concept of prana. I have an amazing book that I can recommend you on pranayama by BKS Iyengar, Light on Pranayama. And I will be just reading a couple of quotes because he so beautifully explains what prana and pranayama is. It is as difficult to explain prana as it is to explain God. Prana is the energy permeating the universe at all levels. It is physical, mental, intellectual, sexual, spiritual, and cosmic energy. All vibrating energies are prana. All physical energies such as heat, light, gravity, magnetism, and electricity are also prana. It is the hidden or potential energy in all beings, released to the fullest extent in times of danger. It is the prime mover of all activity. It is energy which creates, protects, and destroys. Vigor, power, vitality, life, and spirit are all forms of prana. Now, in our yoga practice, prana is usually translated as breath, yet this is only one of its many manifestations in the human body. If breathing stops, so does life. Prana means breath, respiration, life, vitality, energy, or strength. Ayama means stretch, extension, expansion, length, regulation, prolongation, restraint, or control. So if you want to put together the two words, prana and ayama, it means breath control or to restrain the breath. Pranayama is an art and has techniques to make the respiratory organs to move and expand intentionally, rhythmically, and intensively. It consists of long, sustainable, subtle flow of inhalation, which we call puraka, exhalation, which is rachaka, and retention of the breath, which is kumbhaka. Now, some people think or say or teach that pranayama is the flow of the breath. When I was doing my teacher training, we were more thinking about pranayama happening in kumbhaka, so in the retention part of the breath. However, I like to consider the full practice of leading our breath towards that comfortable kumbhaka, whether it's internal kumbhaka or external kumbhaka, as part of our pranayama practice. So we will begin our practice with more subtle or with easier exercises to become more comfortable with breath retention. First of all, we want to build up awareness of our breath. So that will be today's class. Themed around is becoming aware of the breath in the body, the placement of the breath in the body. So I hope that by now you found a completely comfortable seated or laying down position. Take a deep breath here and just arrive to your practice. Ideally, we want to inhale and exhale through the nose. But of course, if it's uncomfortable or not accessible today, you can breathe through your mouth. But if you're breathing through the nose, then just start to observe the breath at the tip of your nose. Let's just begin by dialing everything down, tuning the senses down, shutting down the ears, shutting down the eyes. You can close the eyes if that's comfortable for you. Shutting down the taste, shutting down the sense of smells. And finally, shutting down the senses that are in our skin. And just being here in the moment without any distractions from the senses. Awakening our internal awareness. And just bring your mind's eyes at the tip of the nose. Just see the breath coming and going. Feel the cool air entering on the inhalation. And allow the warm air to exit through the nostrils on the exhalation. Just follow your natural pattern of breathing here. No need to force anything. No need to alter anything at this stage. If you make any observations of the breath, let there be no judgment whatsoever. Just allow the breath to sit in the body as it wishes. It could be that today you have nice and deep breaths. Or it could be that today is a bit more shallow. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter. Let's just respect what we are blessed with today. Finding comfort in acceptance towards our breath and ourselves. The first practice that I would like to teach you is Ujjayi breath. You might have heard of Ujjayi before. It's often translated as ocean breath. we are going to make the sound of our breath audible to ourselves. So I just would like to ask you to gently contract the back of your throat, just slightly narrowing the pathway of the breath, as if you're trying to blow some steam on a window or a mirror. But making sure that the mouth stays closed and that the breath still happens through the nostrils. It is a very calming practice, a practice that we often call upon even when we are practicing our asana practices. And just allow the sound to gently relax the internal ears. Allow the vibration in the throat to relax the vocal cords. We will build our further practices on top of our Ujjayi practice. So the next practice that we will be doing is Viloma, Pranayama. We will take the breath in segments, stopping the breath 1 or 2 times until the lungs are filled up. And then we will exhale with one continuous breath. So when you begin the inhalation, just stop at a point, hold a little break there, then continue inhaling and filling up the lungs. Maybe if you have capacity, you can stop another time, and then continue with the inhalation until you fully reach the capacity of the lungs, and then just exhale with one continuous breath. The practice sounds like this. Whenever you are ready, start taking an inhale. Stop. Continue. Then stop again. And finishing at the top. Then exhaling through the nose or the mouth, whatever feels comfortable here. So just take your own time to practice a few rounds of Viloma Pranayama here. After your next round, complete round, just let go of this practice. Feel free to move around here. Awaken the legs, maybe switch them over before we go on to our next practice. And when you have found a comfortable position to be in, once again, you can close the eyes. The next practice will be to build up towards our 3-part breath. In our 3-part breath, we are going to utilize the space in the abdominal cavity to accommodate a deep breath. We will become aware of our thoracic cavity and also the spaces in the clavicular cavity. So we will begin with first practicing abdominal breathing. I would like to ask you to place your hand on your lower tummy with the thumb resting in the navel and the 4 fingers to fall below the navel. Just allow the hand to indicate the space for the breath. Also, try to imagine that wherever you're taking the breath, so whichever cavity you are working with, the breath is 3-dimensional, meaning that the tummy moves up and down, but also the breath travels back towards the back of the spine, travels left and right in the pelvic bowl, and also up and down in the abdominal cavity. I like to use the analogy of a balloon here. So if we are placing a balloon in the pelvic bowl and start to inflate that balloon, that really travels into all 3 dimensions. So when we are practicing our breath, then we also imagine this breath to travel into 3 different dimensions. So with the hand laying on the top of the tummy, with the next inhale, just send the breath all the way down to the pelvic floor. Allow the hand to move up. And when you exhale, allow the tummy to fall back in towards the back of the spine. And while we are practicing our abdominal breath, we want to keep the chest and the ribs as stable as possible, just with the slightest movements in these areas of the body. We want to guide the breath into the hand and have the most movement happening in the lower part of our tummy. Trying to isolate this segment from the rest. Whenever you are ready, just start with deep breaths into the tummy and exhale out of the tummy. Again, practicing your Ujjayi breathing helps you become aware of the breath. You can also visualize this breath to travel all the way down to the pelvic floor, going deep, deep, deep into that area, relaxing the tummy, allowing it to really blow out like a balloon. And with the exhale, deflate and the muscles to fall back in. Just practicing abdominal breathing in your own time, whenever you're ready. then slowly letting go of this practice. Just reflecting on your experience without any judgment. And then preparing yourself for the next stage, which is becoming aware of our thoracic breath. Building up the relationship to the thoracic cavity. Now, we can use the hands here as well, again for indication. Cupping the ribs with the two hands, with the elbows facing out to the side. Allow the fingers to run down along the ribs with the fingertips pointing towards each other. Now, when we are practicing our thoracic breath, we want to keep the lower tummy as still as possible. So I like to give the instruction here to gently contract the lower tummy muscles, which will really create the space or the direction, more like, of the breath into your thoracic cavity. With the next inhale, when you're taking the breath in, just really visualize your rib cage moving out to the side, back and forth, and also the breath in that area to travel up and down. Elbows move away from one another. And with the exhale, as the ribs fall in towards each other, allow the fingertips to get closer to each other as well. With the inhale, allow the intercostal muscles to stretch, creating space for the breath. And with the exhale, the ribs to close in. Trying to keep the chest still and the tummy still. Practice here for the next few minutes, building awareness of your thoracic breath. Then slowly letting go of this part of the exercise, moving the hands down, just allowing the natural breath to come back to the body. Preparing for our last stage. This time, place the tips of the fingers on your clavicular bones. So those two bones running up in your chest, parallel to the floor, up to your shoulders. You can even place the fingertips into the girdles above the clavicular bones. And just allow the hands to rest on the top of the chest. Now, while we are here, we want to visualize internally the clavicular cavity. This probably is the most challenging part of the practice because the breath here is quite restrained already by the ribs and all the big muscles around the top part of our lungs. However, just imagining those tiny sockets up in your upper back, also in your armpits, the soft parts, you can maybe create awareness of the internal space that's available for you in the top part of your torso. Again, we want to practice this breath three-dimensionally. So when you're breathing into the top part of the chest, allow that chest to move back and forth, side to side, and the breath to travel up and down. And when you're exhaling, just emptying the breath from all these tiny sockets. It's important that when we are working with this upper breath, we want to make sure that we keep the breath below the neck. So just avoid taking the breath into your head and becoming dizzy or lightheaded. If at any point you experience lightheadedness, just allow the practice to drop and come back to your natural pattern of breathing until you find clear-headedness again. But really just visualizing that the breath happens below the neck helps us to prevent ourselves from such experience. So whenever you're ready, keeping the hands on top of your chest, keeping the lower tummy and this time the thoracic cavity as still as possible. Take a deep breath into the upper part of the lungs. And then with the exhale, allow the chest to sink. And practicing your clavicular breathing here for the next few minutes at your own pace, still using your Ujjayi breath. And then slowly letting go of this part of the practice. Release the hands from the chest. Allow the natural pattern of the breath to come back to the body. You can make a little adjustment to your seat if you need to. And then we're going to move on to our complete 3-part breath using these segments, or more like the awareness of these segments in the body. If you want to, you can use the hands as indications once again, or you can just merely follow your internal vision and your already built up awareness of the 3 different cavities. In our 3-part breath, we are going to work and build up the breath from the abdominal cavity up to the thoracic cavity and then up to the very top of the lungs, still staying below the navel or the neck. And then with the exhale, slowly, we will first exhale from the top of the lungs, then moving down to the thoracic cavity, and finally exhaling from the abdominal cavity. So building from base up to the top, and then from the top, lowering the breath and exhaling down back to the base. And that will be one complete round of our 3-part breath. Now you can place one palm on the top of the tummy, one palm on the top of the chest, and just use the hands as indications for the breath when it enters and then when it exits the body. So I hope by now you found a nice, comfortable position to work in. Still using your Ujjayi breath. With the next inhale, inhale into the lower abdominal, then the thoracic cavity, then the top of the lungs, filling up the full lungs completely. And with the exhale, allow the breath to descend from the top of the lungs to the thoracic cavity and finally your abdominal cavity. Let this be one complete round of breath, and whenever you are ready to practice on your own, begin the practice of 3-part breathing. And then slowly letting go of this practice. You're more than welcome to move around a little bit, just awaken the legs. Before we move on to our final stage of our practice today. So, utilizing everything that we have learned throughout this class, we will be moving on to our Vritti practice. Vritti means equal breath, meaning that we will elongate the exhalation to the same length as our inhalation. So the inhale and the exhale will be at the same length. Let our inhalation be the indicator of how long this breath needs to be. And we start counting our breath and use this count to help us equalize the exhalation. Now, while we are practicing Vritti, it's really important to be aware of each segment of our breath. So really, Vritti builds up on the top of our 3-part breath. So still, when you are taking the breath in, visualize that breath to drop all the way down to the pelvic floor, to then travel to the rib cage, and then all the way up to the top of the chest. And when you're exhaling, you are going to reverse the breath. Now, this practice and the count might be different for each one of us, and it might be different for you one day and different another day. It's important to check in with your capacity today and respect it. And it's important to have a sustainable practice, meaning that if you by any chance chose a too high number and you're straining the breath, then just allow the breath to drop back down to a lower number so you can really practice this comfortably and without any sensation of anxiety or stress on the body. So if you're ready, then find a comfortable seat or laying down still. And with the next inhale, just count your breath. And with the exhale, meet the same count until you completely empty your lungs. Take your own time and continue with your Vritti practice at your own pace. And now that you achieved a nice, comfortable practice, you can begin to extend both the inhale and the exhale with 1 or 2 counts. Again, we don't want to strain the breath here, but if it's possible for you to add the number or 2 to both your inhale and exhale, then please feel free to do so. This does not mean that we need to take more air into the lungs. It's simply by using our Ujjayi breath and maybe narrowing the pathway of the breath. So we are inhaling the same amount of air for a longer amount of time. Again, check in with yourself to make sure that the practice that you choose beyond this stage is still accessible to you and sustainable. Or if you need to just stay with the same number, then stay with your previous Vritti practice. Whenever you're ready, just using the next few minutes to extend the breath and attain a deeper and calmer breath here. And then slowly let go of the practice. Allow your natural pattern of breathing to come back to the body. Move around if that feels good. Keep the eyes closed for a moment. And you can slowly awaken the senses. Just move the eyes behind the eyelids. Moisten the lips with the tongue. You can do a couple of stretches here. Maybe take the head from side to side. Maybe move the shoulders around. Move the wrists around. And just awaken the full physical body. You can gently rub the palms together and generate some heat between the palms. And then cup the eye sockets with the palms, just blocking out any light. Allow the eyes to open up, look into the darkness. You can draw some circles with the eyeballs here, one way, and then drawing the circles the other way. You can blink a few times, really awaken the nerves in the eyes, and then slowly moving the hands down, allowing some light to come in and finding your full vision. I hope that you feel good after the practice. I hope that you achieved a sense of calm here through the breath. Just know that this breath can be called upon anytime during the day. If you need a couple of minutes, just equalizing the breath really helps you to calm the mind and to return back to the present moment. Also, I highly recommend being aware of our breath throughout our asana practices as well, because then we can really achieve a next level in our practice. So, well done for completing today's pranayama class. I hope that you are enjoying the benefits for the rest of your day. I hope you have a blissful day full of love, joy, and peaceful moments. And I shall see you in our next practice. Have a wonderful day. Om Shanti Namaste.